Hello, physics students, Mr. Stainerson, and I want to take you through a few things to focus on while you're approaching your next Unit 4 physics. And I want to connect those to some of the lab skills that I would like you to be using throughout the course, but particular now that we've been doing Pivot for a while, what are some things that you can focus on as we move forward in the course, particular to these lab skills. So I'm going to go over some of the ideas in the Pivot, and at the same time I'm going to focus on those lab skills that I want you to reiterate in those. So here is a basic overview of the things that we're going to be looking at, and I'm going to be looking at as we go through the Pivot experience. So for example, measurement. I'm going to show you some of the things to look at for that. Also using the Pivot to make a graph with a data table, find the slope of the graph, using the Pivot to identify your labels, and also the shape of the graph and linearizing your data. Using then that linearized data to produce an equation, and then using that equation to figure out what is a prediction, or using the upgraded equation as well. So these are the things we're going to look at, and I want to focus on those in our recording here today. I'm going to take us back to the Pivot, and we're going to talk about that first one, the measurement first. So when we take a look at the pivots, it's going to ask you to do some different things with a video that has a cart on an Airtable, and then it's suspending some different weights. So I'm going to put a mass on here. I'm going to load that so it gives us a little bit of a different thing. The first thing is really all about measurement. So I want you to really focus in on that. Make sure you're using the correct units and figuring out what things you can measure with the graph and what things and the video and what things that you might have to calculate. It's going to walk you through those types of relationships in a really nice way. So these are some pre-questions to help you be able to get some great data when you're doing the lab. When you actually get down to doing the lab right here, what you're going to be looking at is measuring, and we're going to be measuring different things about force and also things about acceleration. So we're going to at least have to have a column in our data table for net force and acceleration. You can add as many different columns as you want by clicking on the dots and then inserting different columns in your table, as well as more rows. So those things you can arrange as you go. But what I'm going to be looking for is, are you using the measurement tools correctly? So I'm going to walk you through some of those things here. And of course, in our video simulations, the little tool icon in the upper right corner will expand, giving us some more options. So I'm going to pull out a stopwatch, and I'm going to pull out a ruler for this video instance. Now, when we're taking a look at this, it's really important that we're careful about when we start taking our measurements. You're going to measure distance and time, but when do you measure that distance and time is really important in order for us to get accurate data. So what you're going to want to do is look at that video, and I always scrub this back and forth a little bit to see when things actually start happening. If I was to take measurements right away in the first frame, I'd probably get some errors. So I always scrub forward, and I'm looking right here to see what happens. I'm noticing that there's a string that's being cut by a scissors, and that is the time in the video that I want to start recording, because their force that's now going to cause this cart to accelerate, that net force is now the weight on the end of the string. Before, those forces were balanced, so there was no acceleration, and there was also no movement, but more importantly, there was no acceleration. As soon as we cut that string, the forces are unbalanced, therefore there will be an acceleration in this direction. So how do I take some accurate measurements? Well, I'm going to advance this, and then I'm going to reset the timer so that it starts at that point in the video when the string is just cut. Then I'm going to want to find a part of the cart that makes sense for me to take measurements. I can move this ruler anywhere. If I want to measure at the end of the silver tab, that would work. Or if I want to measure at the beginning, something that I can easily see as it's advancing along. I'm going to choose this one here, and then that becomes my my 0 spot. Okay, now this is going to want you to calculate the amount of acceleration at different forces. Those are the two quantities we're going to use, but I don't have anything that's measuring directly the acceleration. Therefore, I need to use my kinematic equations and calculate it basing on the distance and the time that I can find. So you're going to want to reset your stopwatch, And then notice that this is in centimeters. When we are doing our calculations with force, we always need to use the Newton, which is a kilogram times a meter per second squared. Therefore, you're going to have to convert any distance measurements in centimeters to meters. Going back to this, these are all things that I want you to focus on. Conversions when necessary, and also measuring correctly. So I'm going to be looking for that in particular while you're working through this first lab. So I'm going to point out a couple things in our future labs as you go through it, but make sure you're doing this part correctly for this first lab. As you're putting the values in, you're doing the measurements, you're starting after the cart initially starts, you're finding a good start spot, you're double checking your units, and you're matching that up to get some really great data. Please reach out if you have any questions. Thanks, and have a great day.